The night my daughter called me a burden in front of everyone was the same night my secret almost died with a little boy in a hospital miles away. I sat at the dinner table, hands trembling in my lap, while Emily's voice cut through the room like glass. Daniel wouldn't even look at me. Jessica sighed, like she'd expected this all along. "Mom, you can't keep doing this," Emily said. "You disappear, you lie, you don't care about anyone but yourself." They were all staring at me, and I said nothing. Because the truth would destroy everything they thought they knew about me and about themselves. If you've ever been misunderstood by the people you love the most, I want you to stay with me on this story. Please like and subscribe if this touches your heart. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it there right now? I'd really love to know. After my husband passed away 5 years ago, the house grew quieter, but not in the peaceful way people like to imagine. It was the kind of quiet that echoes. Every step I took in that house reminded me of what was missing. Richard had been the center of everything steady patient, the kind of man who knew how to hold a family together without raising his voice. When he was gone, something invisible but essential disappeared with him. At first, Daniel tried to step into that role. He came by more often, called me every other day, made sure I wasn't alone too long. Emily checked in too, though she had always been more distant, more practical. But over time, something changed. Or maybe it was me who changed. The first time I missed one of Emily's Sunday lunches, she brushed it off. "It's fine, Mom," she said. "You probably just forgot." The second time, she sounded irritated. By the third time, she stopped inviting me altogether. Daniel was slower to judge, but I could see it in his eyes. That quiet disappointment. The way he'd pause before speaking, as if choosing words carefully around someone fragile. "Mom, you've been different lately," he told me one afternoon while standing in my kitchen. I smiled at him the same way I always did. Different how? He hesitated. "You cancel plans last minute. You don't answer your phone. Sometimes you just disappear." Disappear. That word stayed with me longer than it should have. "I'm still here," I said softly. But even as I said it, I knew he didn't believe me. Jessica never pretended to understand. From the very beginning, she had been polite, but distant. The kind of polite that felt like a wall. After I started missing events, her politeness turned into something sharper. Judgment. "You can't just come and go like this, Kimberly," she told me once, standing in their living room with her arms crossed. "Ethan notices. He asks where you are." That one hurt, because Ethan, he was the one person I never wanted to disappoint. My grandson had this way of lighting up when he saw me, like I was still someone important. Like I still mattered. "I'll do better," I promised her. And I meant it. I really did. But life doesn't always care about promises. The truth was, my days had started revolving around something no one in my family knew about. Something I couldn't explain. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, and sometimes weekends, I would leave the house quietly. I'd make sure the lights were off, that everything looked normal, and then I'd drive. Not to a friend's house, not to a club or a meeting, but to a place that smelled like antiseptic and quiet desperation. A place where time moved differently. A hospital. I never told anyone. At first, I convinced myself it was temporary. Just something I needed to handle. Something that would be over soon enough, and then everything could go back to normal. But weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. And the more time passed, the harder it became to explain. So I stopped trying. Instead, I let them believe what they wanted, that I was forgetful, irresponsible, unreliable. Each label stung, but not as much as the truth would have. Because the truth wasn't just mine. It belonged to someone else. And I had made a promise I intended to keep no matter the cost. One evening, Daniel showed up at my house unannounced. I had just come back from the hospital, still wearing the same sweater I'd had on for hours. My hair was a mess, my eyes tired. He noticed immediately. "Where were you?" he asked, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I was out," I said, setting my purse down. "Out where?" I forced a small smile. "Just running errands." He didn't smile back. "Mom, it's 9:30 at night." I shrugged lightly, pretending it didn't matter. "Stores stay open late." He stared at me like he was trying to see through me. "You didn't answer your phone," he said. "I must have missed it." "You missed 6 calls." There was a long pause between us. I could feel the tension building, stretching thin like glass about to crack. "Are you in trouble?" he asked finally. "Financial trouble." "Did something happen after Dad died that you didn't tell us?" There it was. The suspicion I had been expecting. I shook my head. "No, Daniel. I'm fine. You don't look fine. I'm just tired." "Then let us help you." That almost broke me, because help was the one thing I couldn't accept, not without telling them everything. And I wasn't ready for that. "I don't need help," I said quietly. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "You don't get to decide that alone anymore," he snapped. "We're your family." I looked at him, then really looked at him. My son. The boy I had raised, protected, sacrificed for. The man who now stood in front of me, convinced I was hiding something shameful. If only he knew. If only he understood that everything I was doing was because of him. "I know you're my family," I said softly. "That's exactly why I can't explain right now." That answer only made things worse. His expression hardened. "So, there is something." I stayed silent. "Mom," his voice dropped quieter now, but more dangerous. "If you don't tell me what's going on, I'm going to find out myself." A chill ran through me. Because I knew he meant it. Daniel had always been stubborn. Once he decided something, he didn't stop until he got answers, and if he started digging, he would find the hospital. He would find the records. He would find him. "Please, don't," I whispered. But it was already too late. Daniel stepped back toward the door. "I can't just stand here and watch you fall apart," he said. "If you won't talk to me, I'll figure it out on my own." The door closed behind him with a quiet finality that echoed through the house. I stood there for a long time, unable to move, because for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. Fear. Not for me, but for what would happen when the truth finally came out. Ethan's birthday was the one day I had promised myself I would not miss. No matter what happened, no matter who called, no matter what. I had circled the date on my calendar weeks in advance. I had even bought his gift early, a small telescope he'd been begging for ever since he told me he wanted to see the stars like a real scientist. I wrapped it myself, carefully smoothing every corner of the paper like it mattered more than it should. Because, to me, it did. That morning, I woke up with a strange sense of determination. I made coffee, stood in the quiet kitchen, and told myself over and over again, "Today you stay. No distractions, no excuses, just family." By the afternoon, I was already at Daniel's house earlier than anyone expected. Jessica looked surprised when she opened the door. "Oh, you're early," she said. I smiled. I didn't want to be late. There was a flicker of something in her eyes, maybe doubt, maybe suspicion, but she stepped aside and let me in. The house was already buzzing with energy. Balloons tied to chairs, wrapping paper scattered across the table, the smell of cake filling the air. And there he was, Ethan. The moment he saw me, his face lit up like I was the best part of his day. "Grandma," he shouted, running straight into my arms. That alone made everything worth it. "I made it," I whispered, holding him tighter than I probably should have. "You always make it," he said innocently. I froze for just a second, but then I smiled and kissed the top of his head. "Of course I do." For a few hours, everything felt normal. I helped set the table. I laughed at Daniel's jokes. I even managed to have a short civil conversation with Jessica. Emily arrived later, carrying a gift bag and her usual sharp energy. She gave me a quick glance when she walked in. "You're here," she said, almost surprised. "I told you I would be." She nodded, but didn't say anything else. Still, for that brief moment, I thought maybe things were changing. Maybe I could fix this. Maybe I could hold everything together just a little longer. Then my phone rang. I felt it vibrate in my purse before I heard it. Just one vibration. But it was enough. My heart dropped instantly, because I knew that number. I didn't need to look. I already knew. I tried to ignore it. I really did. I stayed where I was sitting at the edge of the table while Ethan showed off his new toys. I forced myself to smile, to nod, to act like everything was fine. Then it rang again. Longer this time. More urgent. I excused myself quietly, stepping into the hallway. When I pulled out my phone, my hands were already shaking. The caller ID confirmed it. St. Mary's Hospital. I closed my eyes. Not today. Please, not today. But I answered anyway. "Hello? Miss Brooks." It was Nurse Angela. Her voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the urgency beneath it. "Yes, it's Lucas. He's not responding well to the treatment. Dr. Carter needs you here immediately." My chest tightened. "How bad is it?" I asked. There was a pause. The kind of pause that tells you everything before the words come. "It's serious." I leaned against the wall, trying to steady myself. "It'll be there," I said. "Please hurry." The call ended. For a moment, I just stood there, listening to the laughter from the other room. Ethan's voice, Daniel's, Emily's. The life I was supposed to be part of. And then there was the other life. The one no one knew about. The one that needed me more. I walked back into the room slowly. Ethan ran up to me again, holding a toy in his hands. "Grandma, look." I knelt down, forcing the smile. "That's amazing, sweetheart. Stay and watch me play, okay?" The words hit me like a knife. Stay. I looked up and saw Daniel watching me from across the room. He knew something was off. He always did. "I have to step out for a bit," I said, standing up. The room went quiet. Emily's expression hardened immediately. "Are you serious?" she asked. "I won't be long." "You just got here." "I know, but Mom, it's his birthday," she snapped. "I know that, Emily." "Then act like it." Jessica crossed her arms, shaking her head slightly like she'd expected this all along. Daniel stepped forward. "What's going on?" he asked. "Nothing," I said quickly. "I just need to take care of something." "What could possibly be more important than this?" Emily demanded. I opened my mouth, and then I closed it again, because there was no answer I could give them, not one they would understand. "I'll explain later," I said softly. Emily let out a bitter laugh. "You always say that. Please." "No, Mom. No more please. No more excuses." Her voice rose sharp and unforgiving. "You don't care about anyone but yourself." That wasn't true. God, it was so far from the truth. But I couldn't say that. I couldn't say anything. Daniel's voice was quieter, but somehow worse. "Are you even trying anymore?" he asked. I felt something inside me crack. "I am trying," I whispered. "It doesn't look like it." Ethan was standing behind them now, confused, clutching his toy. "Grandma?" he said softly. I couldn't look at him. If I did, I wouldn't be able to leave. And I had to leave. Because somewhere across town, a little boy was fighting to stay alive. And I was the only one who had promised he wouldn't be alone. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice breaking. Then I turned and walked out. I could hear Emily's voice behind me. "Unbelievable!" The door closed before I could hear anything else. The drive to the hospital felt longer than usual. Every red light felt like an accusation. Every second felt stolen from someone, from Ethan, from Lucas, from myself. When I finally arrived, I didn't even bother parking properly. I rushed inside, my heart pounding in my chest. Nurse Angela met me halfway down the hallway. "You came fast," she said. "I always do." She gave me a look. Not judgment, not pity, just understanding. "He's in room 312, she said. I nodded and walked toward the door. And just before I stepped inside, I paused. Because I knew something that made my hands tremble again. Tonight had changed everything. Because this time, someone had seen me leave, and I had a feeling they weren't going to let it go. The next morning, I woke up with a heaviness in my chest that had nothing to do with sleep. I barely remembered driving home from the hospital the night before. Lucas had stabilized barely, but the image of him lying there so small and fragile refused to leave my mind. And yet somehow that wasn't what scared me the most anymore. It was Daniel. The way he had looked at me before I left. The way his voice had changed. The way he said, "I'll find out myself." I knew my son, and I knew exactly what that meant. By the time I poured my first cup of coffee, my phone was already ringing. "Daniel." I stared at the screen for a few seconds before answering. "Hello? Where are you?" he asked immediately. No greeting, no softness, just tension, at home. There was a pause, like he was deciding whether to believe me. "Coming over," he said. "You don't have to. I'm already on my way." The line went dead. I set the phone down slowly, my hands already trembling. This was it. Whatever fragile distance I had been maintaining between my two worlds, it was collapsing. 20 minutes later, Daniel was standing in my living room. He didn't sit down, didn't even take off his jacket. He just stood there, looking at me like I was someone he didn't recognize. "Start talking," he said. I took a breath. "About what?" "Don't do that," he snapped. "Don't pretend you don't know what I'm talking about." I stayed quiet. His jaw tightened. "I followed you last night." My heart dropped. Of course he did. "You left Ethan's birthday," he continued, his voice rising slightly, "and drove straight across town. You didn't go to a friend's house. You didn't run errands." He took a step closer. "You went to a hospital." The word hung in the air between us. Heavy, irreversible. I felt the room spin just slightly, but I forced myself to stay still. "Why?" he demanded. I swallowed hard. "I can't tell you that." The anger in his eyes flared instantly. "You can't," he repeated. "Or you won't. It's not that simple. It is that simple." "Mom," he shot back, "you've been lying to us for years. You disappear, you ignore calls, you ruin important moments, and now I find out you're hiding something at a hospital." His voice cracked slightly on the last word. "Do you have any idea what that looks like?" I did. It looked exactly like what they thought it was. A woman who didn't care. A woman with secrets. A woman who had chosen something or someone else over her own family. I know how it looks, I said quietly. Then explain it, he said, almost pleading now. Please, just explain it. That word again. Please. The same word I had used the night before. And just like then, it wasn't enough. I can't, I whispered. Something inside him broke right then. I saw it, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, like trust slipping through his fingers. He let out a slow breath, stepping back as if he needed distance from me. Is it money? He asked suddenly. Are you paying for something? Someone is that woo. You paying for something? Someone is that woo. Here your savings are going? I didn't answer. Because I checked your accounts. He continued, his voice steadier now, but colder. You've been withdrawing money every single month. Large amounts. Here your savings are going. I didn't answer. Because I checked your accounts. He continued, his voice steadier now, but colder. You've been withdrawing money every single month. Large amounts. My stomach tightened. I had to know, he said defensively. You weren't giving me any answers. I understand, I said. Do you? He snapped. Because from where I'm standing, it feels like you've been living a completely separate life, and we mean nothing to you. That hurt. More than anything else, he had said. You mean everything to me, I said, my voice breaking slightly. Then prove it, he said immediately. I looked at him, at my son, the boy I used to hold when he was scared of thunderstorms, the teenager who once told me I was the only person he trusted, the man who now stood in front of me asking for the truth. And I couldn't give it to him. Not yet. If I tell you, I said slowly, it won't just affect me. He frowned. What does that mean? It means I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. It could change things, for everyone. Good, he said harshly. Maybe things need to change. You don't understand. Then help me understand, he shouted. The room fell silent again. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said something that made my chest tighten. Is there someone else? I blinked. What is that? He pressed. Another family, another life, someone you've been taking care of instead of us. The accusation hit me like a slap. No, I said firmly. Then what is it? I shook my head. I can't tell you yet. The word yet seemed to catch his attention. He narrowed his eyes slightly. Yet he repeated, So there is something. I stayed silent. He let out a bitter laugh. Unbelievable. Then he turned and walked toward the door. Daniel, wait. No, he said, not even looking back. I'm done asking. My heart started racing. What does that mean? It means I'm going to find out the truth? Unbelievable. Then he turned and walked toward the door. Daniel, wait. No, he said, not even looking back. I'm done asking. My heart started racing. What does that mean? It means I'm going to find out the truth, he said, opening the door. With or without you, please don't do this. He paused for just a second, and for a moment I thought maybe he would turn around. Maybe he would soften. Maybe he would give me more time. But then he said the one thing I had been dreading. I already went back this morning. Everything inside me went still. What I whispered. The hospital, he said. I went there, asked questions. My hands went cold, and I asked, barely able to breathe. They wouldn't tell me anything he said. Privacy policies, patient confidentiality. Relief flooded through me, but only for a second. Which means he continued, his voice low and determined, whatever you're hiding, it's big. He finally turned to look at me again. And this time, there was no hesitation in his eyes. Don't worry, he said. I'll figure it out. Then he walked out. The door closed behind him with a finality that echoed through the house. I stood there unable to move, because I knew something Daniel didn't, something he would learn soon enough. Hospitals keep records, names, connections, histories, and if he kept digging, he wouldn't just find out where I had been. He would find out why. And when he did, it wouldn't just change how he saw me. It would change how he saw himself. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed at the hospital. I sat beside Lucas's bed, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest, listening to the quiet rhythm of machines that had become more familiar to me than my own living room. The fluorescent lights cast a pale glow over everything, making time feel suspended, like the outside world didn't exist anymore. But it did, and it was getting closer. I reached out and gently adjusted the blanket around Lucas's shoulders. His skin looked even paler than usual, his small hands barely visible against the white sheets. "You scared me today," I whispered. He didn't respond, of course. He rarely did anymore. But I talked anyway, because I had promised him something years ago, that he would never be alone, and I had kept that promise even when it cost me everything else. A soft knock came at the door before it opened. Dr. Carter stepped inside, his expression serious but not panicked. "He's stable for now," he said quietly. "For now," I repeated. He nodded. We adjusted his treatment. His body is fighting, but it's been a long road. I looked back at Lucas. How much longer can he keep fighting? Dr. Carter didn't answer immediately. That told me everything I needed to know. "He needs more than what we're doing," he finally said. "But without—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Without full family involvement, our options are limited." There it was. The truth I had been avoiding. The truth that was no longer just mine to carry. "I know," I whispered. He studied me for a moment. "You've done more than most people would," he said gently. "But at some point, the truth has to come out." I closed my eyes briefly. "I'm not ready, Kimberly," he said softly. "This isn't about readiness anymore." I didn't respond, because deep down, I knew he was right. After he left, I sat there in silence. The past began to creep in again, like it always did when I was alone with my thoughts. The memory I had spent years trying to control. The night everything changed. The rain had been heavy that evening. I remembered the sound of it hitting the windshield, the way the road blurred under the streetlights. I had been driving too fast, not recklessly, just distracted. Daniel had called me earlier that night. He was young then, barely out of college, full of plans, full of dreams. He had told me about a girl, Sarah. He sounded nervous, excited. I had smiled the entire time we talked. I never imagined that name would become something I could never escape. The memory cut off there like it always did when I tried to go further, because that was the part I couldn't relive without breaking. I opened my eyes and looked at Lucas again. His face, there were pieces of Daniel in it. The same curve of his nose, the same shape of his eyes. It had taken me a long time to accept what I was seeing. At first, I thought it was just coincidence, then denial, then fear, and finally, certainty. "I wish things were different," I whispered, but I couldn't risk losing him. I wasn't sure if I meant Lucas or Daniel. Probably both. My phone buzzed in my purse, pulling me back to the present. I didn't want to look, but I knew I had to. When I pulled it out, I saw multiple missed calls. Emily, Jessica, and then a message from Daniel. "We need to talk. Now." My chest tightened again. It was happening faster than I expected. I typed a quick response. "I'm busy. I'll call you later." The reply came almost immediately. "No, I'm not waiting anymore." Before I could respond, another message appeared. I know his name. My breath caught. For a moment, I couldn't move. Lucas Reed, the next message read. My hands started shaking. He had found him. I looked toward the door instinctively, as if Daniel might walk in at any moment. How I whispered to myself, I had been so careful. So careful. But I underestimated something. Not his determination, not his intelligence, his connection. Hospitals protect patient information, but they don't protect patterns. And Daniel had always been good at seeing patterns. I stood up slowly, my heart racing. If he knew the name, it was only a matter of time before he found the rest. Another message came through. Who is he, Mom? I stared at the screen, at the question I had been avoiding for years, at the truth that was finally catching up to me. Behind me, Lucas shifted slightly in his bed, a faint sound escaping his lips. I turned back to him immediately, moving closer. I'm here, I said softly, but my voice didn't sound steady anymore, because for the first time, I realized something terrifying. I was running out of time, not just for Lucas, but for the truth. I pee not just for Lucas, but for the truth. I picked up my phone again, my fingers hovering over the screen. Daniel was waiting, demanding answers, and this time I wasn't sure I could keep hiding. Because the moment he stepped into this room, picked up my phone again, my fingers hovering over the screen. Daniel was waiting, demanding answers. And this time, I wasn't sure I could keep hiding, because the moment he stepped into this room, everything would change. Not just how he saw me, but how he saw his own life, his past, his choices, his future. And once that door opened, there would be no closing it again. I didn't answer Daniel's message, not right away. Instead, I stood there beside Lucas's bed, staring at my phone like it might explode in my hands if I touched it again. I know his name. Those 4 words echoed in my mind over and over. I had always known this moment would come. I just never thought it would come like this. Fast, sudden, unstoppable. Kimberly! I turned to see Nurse Angela standing quietly in the doorway again. She must have noticed something was wrong. You okay? She asked gently. I forced a small nod. My son, he found out about Lucas. Her expression shifted immediately. How much does he know? Just his name? I said. For now. Angela stepped inside, closing the door softly behind her. That's enough to start, she said carefully. I know, and if he keeps asking questions, he will. There was no doubt in my voice, because Daniel didn't stop. He never had. Angela hesitated before speaking again. Maybe it's time. I let out a shaky breath. Everyone keeps saying that. Because it's true, she said softly. I looked at Lucas again. His breathing was still uneven but steadier than before. Fragile. Everything felt fragile. My son thinks I've been lying to him, I whispered. That I don't care about my family. Angela didn't respond, because there was nothing to say. From the outside, it did look that way. He doesn't know that everything I've done was for him, I continued. Then maybe he deserves to know. I shook my head immediately. No, not like this. From the outside, it did look that way. He doesn't know that everything I've done was for him, I continued. Then maybe he deserves to know. I shook my head immediately. No, not like this. Then when I didn't have an answer, because there was no perfect time for a truth like this. Only moments where it became impossible to hide anymore. and I was standing right in the middle of one. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Daniel. "I'm coming there." My stomach dropped. "No," I whispered. Angela frowned. "What is it?" "He's coming here," I said, my voice tightening. "He's on his way." There was a brief silence between us. Then Angela spoke carefully. "We can't stop him from being in the hospital. I know, but we can't give him information either." I know I repeated more sharply this time. The problem wasn't the hospital. The problem was me. Because once Daniel saw Lucas's, he wouldn't need anyone to tell him anything. He would see it, the resemblance. The truth written in features neither of them even knew they shared. And once he saw it, everything would fall apart. "I need time," I said, more to myself than to Angela. "Then you don't have much of it." She was right. I stepped out into the hallway, trying to think, trying to breathe, trying to figure out how to stop something that had already started. My phone rang. "Daniel," this time I answered. "Where are you?" he asked immediately. His voice sounded different now, not just angry, focused, determined. "At home," I said automatically. There was a pause, then a quiet, almost cold response. "No, you're not." My chest tightened. "I tracked your car," he continued. "You're at St. Mary's." I closed my eyes. "Of course he did. You shouldn't have done that," I said softly. "You shouldn't have lied," he shot back. Another pause, then more quietly. "I'm 5 minutes away." My heart started pounding. "Daniel, don't. I'm already here." The call ended. I stood frozen in the hallway. 5 minutes. That's all I had. 5 minutes before my two worlds collided. I rushed back into the room. Angela looked up immediately. "Hez here," I said. She inhaled sharply. "Okay," she said quickly. "We need to stay calm." "There is no calm," I whispered. I looked at Lucas, at his small, fragile body, at the boy who had unknowingly changed everything about my life. "I promised you," I said softly, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. Angela placed a hand gently on my arm. "Whatever happens," she said, "you're not alone in this." I nodded, even though it didn't feel true. Because some truths you carry alone. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside, firm, quick, familiar. My heart stopped. Daniel. I could feel it before I saw him. The door opened, and there he was, breathing slightly heavier than usual, eyes scanning the room, taking everything in. Then his gaze landed on Lucas, and everything went still. He didn't speak right away, didn't move, just stood there, staring. I watched his expression change, confusion, then something else, something deeper, recognition. "What?" he whispered. I felt my throat tighten. "Daniel." He held up a hand, silencing me. His eyes never left Lucas. "Who is he?" he asked quietly. I couldn't answer. "Not yet, not like this." "Mom," he said again, his voice sharper now. "Who is he?" I stepped forward slowly. "He's someone who needs help." Daniel let out a short, disbelieving breath. "Don't do that," he said. "Don't give me another half answer." I hesitated, because I could see it now. The moment hanging right in front of me, the edge of the truth. One step closer, and everything would change. "He's been in this hospital for years." Daniel continued, his voice tight. "You've been coming here, paying for his treatment." He finally turned to look at me. Why I opened my mouth, closed it again, because the words felt too heavy to say out loud. "Look at him," Daniel said suddenly. "I have," I whispered. "No," he said, stepping closer to the bed. "Really look at him." I didn't want to, but I did, and I saw exactly what he was starting to see. The similarities, the truth. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, his breathing uneven now. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. Why him?" I took another step closer. "Daniel." He looked at me again, and this time there was something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Fear. "What aren't you telling me?" he asked. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, the moment closer. And I knew I couldn't hold it back much longer. Daniel didn't move. Neither did I. The room felt like it had stopped breathing with us. He stood beside Lucas's bed, staring down at him. His expression caught somewhere between confusion and something much deeper, something he didn't want to recognize yet. "Why does he look like me?" he asked quietly. The question landed exactly where I feared it would. There was no anger in his voice this time, just fear. I felt my throat tighten. "It's not what you think," I said quickly. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew they sounded weak, unconvincing, because the truth had already begun to reveal itself. Daniel let out a slow breath, his eyes never leaving Lucas. "No," he said softly. "It's exactly what I think." My heart pounded harder. "You don't understand the situation," I said. "Then explain it," he replied, his voice still calm, but dangerously calm now. That kind of calm was worse than anger, because it meant he was already putting the pieces together. I stepped closer. "Daniel, please, let's talk somewhere else." "No," he said immediately. His eyes finally shifted to mine. "We're talking right here." I glanced at Angela, who stood quietly near the door, watching everything unfold. She didn't interfere. She couldn't. This wasn't her moment to step in. It was mine, and I was running out of time. Daniel turned back to Lucas again. "How long?" he asked. I hesitated. "How long has he been here?" "Years," I admitted. Daniel nodded slowly, like that confirmed something for him. "And you've been coming here all this time?" "Yes." "Paying for his treatment?" I swallowed. "Yes." He let out a bitter laugh. "While we thought you were just what forgetful careless." Each word felt like a small knife. "I didn't want you to think that," I said quietly. "Then why didn't you tell us?" he shot back. I opened my mouth, closed it again, because the answer was too big, too heavy. "I had my reasons," I said finally. "That's not good enough anymore," Daniel said. His voice was rising again now, the calm cracking. "Do you have any idea what this has done to us?" he continued. "To Emily." To Ethan, I flinched slightly at Ethan's name. "I know," I whispered. "No, you don't," he said, "because if you did, you wouldn't have kept choosing this over us." "That's not true." "Then what is it?" he demanded. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been living a double life." I shook my head, my chest tightening. "I wasn't choosing him over you." "Then what were you doing?" he asked, frustration spilling over now. I looked at Lucas, at the boy who had unknowingly pulled my life in two. I was protecting you, I said softly. Daniel froze. What I was protecting you, I repeated. The words hung in the air. Strange. Out of place. What does that even mean? He asked, his voice lower now, confused. I took a deep breath. This was it. The edge of everything. Daniel. This didn't start here, I said slowly. It started years ago. He frowned slightly. What are you talking about? I hesitated, because once I said it, there was no taking it back. Do you remember Sarah Reed? I asked. The name hit him instantly. I saw it in his eyes. Recognition, surprise. Then something else. Yeah, he said slowly. Of course I remember Sarah. His voice softened just slightly. She was important to me. I nodded. I know. He looked confused now. What does she have to do with this? Everything. She was pregnant, I said. The words fell between us like a weight. Daniel blinked. What? She was pregnant, Daniel. He stared at me, shaking his head slightly. No, she would have told me. She didn't, I said. That doesn't make sense, he insisted. We talked about everything. You didn't know, I said gently, because she didn't want to tell you. Why wouldn't she tell me something like that? He demanded. I swallowed hard. Because of what happened. His expression shifted again. What happened? The memory I had been holding back for years finally pushed forward. The rain, the road, the moment everything changed. I was driving that night, I said quietly. Daniel frowned. What night? The night of the accident. The color drained slightly from his face. That was years ago, he said. I know. You said it was just some random accident. A woman got hurt. It wasn't random, I said. He stopped. Completely. It was Sarah, I said. Silence. Total suffocating silence. Daniel stared at me like he hadn't heard me correctly. What he whispered. The woman in that accident, I said, my voice shaking now. It was Sarah Reed. He took a step back. No, I didn't know at first. I continued quickly. It was dark. It was raining. I didn't see clearly. No, he said again, louder this time. But when I got to the hospital, when I saw her. No, he shouted. Lucas stirred slightly in the bed at the sound. Angela moved forward, instinctively checking on him, but Daniel didn't even notice. He was staring at me now, completely focused, completely shattered. You're lying, he said. I wish I was. He shook his head, pacing a few steps away, then back again. That's not possible, he said. If that were true, I would have known. Someone would have told me. She didn't want you to know, I said. Why, he demanded. Because she didn't want to ruin your future. The words hit him hard. I could see it. She knew you were just starting your career, I continued. She knew you weren't ready for that kind of responsibility. And so she just disappeared, he asked, his voice breaking now. She didn't disappear, I said. She stopped answering my calls, he said, his voice rising again. She left without saying anything. She was in the hospital, Daniel, I said. Fighting to survive. The truth settled into the room, heavy, unavoidable. And the baby, he asked slowly. I looked at Lucas, then back at him. That's him, I said. Daniel's gaze followed mine. Back to the bed, back to the boy. The resemblance he had already seen. The truth he had already begun to understand. That's my son, he whispered. I nodded. Yes. Everything inside him seemed to collapse at once. He staggered slightly, catching himself on the edge of the bed. His eyes filled with something raw, something broken. I didn't know he said, his voice barely audible. I know. I didn't know. He repeated. I know. I said again, stepping closer. For the first time, there was no more hiding, no more secrets, just truth, and the damage it carried. Daniel didn't say anything for a long time. He just stood there staring at Lucas like the world had shifted beneath his feet, and he didn't know how to stand anymore. That's my son, he said again, quieter this time, like he was trying to convince himself it was real. Yes. The word felt heavier than anything I had ever said. He took a slow step closer to the bed. Lucas's small chest rose and fell under the blanket machines, humming softly around him. Daniel's hand hovered slightly in the air, unsure, hesitant, like he didn't have the right to touch him. How old is he? He asked. 10. Daniel blinked hard. 10, he repeated. That means he was born right after the accident. Daniel's hand hovered slightly in the air, unsure, hesitant, like he didn't have the right to touch him. How old is he? He asked. 10. Daniel blinked hard. 10, he repeated. That means he was born right after the accident, I said. He nodded slowly, piecing it together. And you've known this whole time, he asked. Yes. And you didn't tell me. His voice cracked, anger creeping back in. For 10 years, Mom, I couldn't. You couldn't, he repeated sharply. Or you didn't want to. I took a breath, forcing myself to stay calm. She asked me not to, I said. Sarah. Yes. Daniel shook his head in disbelief. That doesn't make any sense, he said. Why would she keep something like that from me? Because she thought she was protecting you, I replied. Protecting me from what? He snapped. From responsibility, I said. From having to give up your future. That wasn't her decision to make, he said immediately. I know that. Then why did you respect it? He demanded. Why didn't you tell me anyway? I hesitated. Because this was the part that hurt the most. Because I agreed with her, I said quietly. Daniel stared at me. What, you had just started your career? I continued. You were finally stable. You were building something for yourself. And then the accident happened. That doesn't justify. You weren't ready? Daniel, I said gently. His expression hardened instantly. You don't get to decide that for me. I wasn't deciding it alone, I said. Sarah made that choice too. And now she's gone, he said bitterly. So I don't even get to ask her why. Silence fell again. He turned back to Lucas, his jaw tightening. What happened to her? He asked after a moment. I swallowed. She didn't recover, I said softly. The words hit him hard. I saw it in the way his shoulders stiffened. How long? He asked. A few months after the accident. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, like he needed to block everything out for just a second. She died, and I didn't even know, he whispered. I'm sorry. He let out a slow breath, shaking his head. This is insane, he said. This whole thing, it doesn't feel real. I understood that feeling, because I had lived with it for years. After she passed, I continued carefully. Lucas didn't have anyone else. Daniel looked at me again. What about her family? They couldn't take care of him long term, I said. And after the accident, his condition required constant medical attention. Daniel's eyes shifted back to the machines around the bed. He's been like this all his life, he asked. Not at first, I said. But the injuries from the accident, they changed everything. The truth settled in slowly, painfully.
So this,
Daniel gestured around the room.
this is because of that night?
I nodded.
Yes.
He let out a hollow laugh.
So you hit her, and then you took responsibility for her son.
It wasn't that simple, I said.
It seems pretty simple to me, he replied. There were legal consequences, I said. Insurance settlements, but none of that mattered to me.
Then what did making sure he was okay? I said. Making sure he survived. Daniel looked at Lucas again, his expression softening just slightly.
And you've been doing that alone? Yes. For 10 years, yes.
He shook his head again like he couldn't wrap his mind around it.
And we just what? We were completely clueless, he said.
I didn't respond.
Because that part was true. You let us think you were irresponsible?
He continued.
Careless, selfish.
I didn't let you, I said quietly. I just didn't correct you.
That's the same thing, he snapped.
Maybe it was. But at the time, it had felt easier than destroying everything. I didn't want to drag you into this, I said.
But I was already in it,
he said, his voice rising again.
He's my son.
Maybe it was. But at the time, it had felt easier than destroying everything. I didn't want to drag you into this, I said.
But I was already in it,
he said, his voice rising again.
Is my son, Lucas, stirred slightly at the sound, his breathing shifting.
Angela stepped forward again, checking the monitor. Please keep your voices down, she said gently. Daniel nodded immediately, stepping back a little.
I'm sorry, he muttered.
His eyes returned to Lucas, softer now.
More careful.
What does he need? He asked quietly. The question caught me off guard. What? What does he need? He repeated.
Treatment surgery.
Something else? I hesitated, because this was the part I had been trying to avoid. He needs family consent for certain procedures, I said. Daniel frowned.
What kind of procedures?
More aggressive treatment, I said. Something that could help him improve, but it's risky. And you couldn't approve it.
I'm not legally his guardian,
I said. Daniel looked at me sharply.
So you've been waiting all this time for me?
I didn't want to force this on you, I said. He let out a slow breath.
But now you don't have a choice.
No, I admitted. Neither of us did. He stepped closer to the bed again, this time without hesitation. Slowly, carefully, he reached out and took Lucas's hand. It looked so small in his, so fragile. Daniel swallowed hard.
He's warm,
he said quietly.
Yes.
He stared down at him for a long moment. Then he whispered something I hadn't expected. I should have been here. My chest tightened. You didn't know, I said. That doesn't change anything. He replied. It did, but I didn't argue, because I could see what was happening. The shift, the beginning of something new. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something close to it. Daniel looked up at me again.
This isn't over,
he said.
I know. We still need to talk about everything, he added. About why you kept this from me. I understand. But right now, he looked back at Lucas, his voice softer. He comes first. Tears burned behind my eyes, because for the first time in years, I wasn't carrying this alone. But even then, I knew something. This was only the beginning. Because once Daniel stepped into this role, there was no going back. Daniel didn't leave the hospital that night. He stayed.
At first, he stood by the window arms, crossed silent, like he didn't trust himself to get too close again. Every few minutes, his eyes drifted back to Lucas, almost like he was checking if the boy was still real, like he might disappear if he looked away too long. I sat in the chair beside the bed, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. For 10 years, I had carried this alone, and now, suddenly, I wasn't alone anymore. But somehow that felt even heavier. "Why didn't you tell me after she died?" Daniel asked suddenly. His voice cut through the quiet softer than before, but sharper in a different way. I looked up at him. I thought about it. I admitted. "When?" "Every day," I said. "For months. Maybe longer." He let out a slow breath, pacing a few steps before stopping again. "And you still chose not to." "I chose to wait," I corrected gently. "For what he asked. For the right time." Daniel gave a hollow laugh. "There's no right time for something like this. I know that now." He shook his head, frustrated. "No, you knew that then too." He wasn't wrong. But back then, everything had felt different. More fragile. More uncertain. "You were still grieving Sarah," I said. "You were trying to move on. Build a life. And you thought telling me I had a son would ruin that," he asked. "I thought it would complicate it," I said. "It would have changed it," he replied. "Yes, that's my right," he said firmly. That was my choice to make. The weight of that truth settled between us. Heavy, unavoidable. "I know," I whispered. "And instead, you made that choice for me," he continued. "You and Sarah both." I didn't argue, because there was nothing I could say that would undo that, nothing that would make it right. I was afraid I admitted quietly. "Of what? That you would resent him," I said. Daniel's expression softened slightly just for a moment. "Why would I resent him?" "Because he came into your life through pain," I said. "Through loss. Through something you didn't choose." Daniel looked at Lucas again. Longer this time. "I don't resent him," he said quietly. I nodded. "I can see that. But I do resent this." He added, his voice tightening again. "I understand." "No," he said, shaking his head. "You don't. Because you weren't the one left in the dark for 10 years. That one hurt. Because he was right. "I can't change the past," I said. "No," he agreed. "But you can stop hiding now. I'm not hiding anymore." He looked at me carefully. "Are you sure about that?" I hesitated, because even now there were still pieces I hadn't said out loud. "You don't know everything yet," I admitted. Daniel's jaw tightened. "What else is there?" I glanced at Lucas, then back at him. "His condition," I said. "It's more complicated than what you're seeing." Daniel stepped closer again. "What do you mean?" "The injuries from the accident caused long-term damage," I explained. "Neurological, physical. It's affected ever physical. It's affected ever. I think." "Will he recover?" Daniel asked. I paused. That question had never had a simple answer. "He's been fighting for years," I said. "But his body is tired." Daniel swallowed hard. "And the treatment you mentioned earlier, Ethan." "Will he recover?" Daniel asked. I paused. That question had never had a simple answer. "He's been fighting for years," I said. "But his body is tired." Daniel swallowed hard. "And the treatment you mentioned earlier?" "It's experimental," I said. "More aggressive. It could help him improve, but it also carries risks." "What kind of risks?" "It could make things worse," I said quietly. "Or it could be too much for him to handle." Daniel looked at Lucas again.
his expression torn. And he need again, his expression torn. And he need is my consent for this. Yes. Daniel ran a hand over his face, clearly overwhelmed. So, let me get this straight, he said slowly. I just found out I have a 10-year-old son who's been in the hospital most of his life's my consent for this. Yes. Daniel ran a hand over his face, clearly overwhelmed. So, let me get this straight, he said slowly. I just found out I have a 10-year-old son who's been in the hospital most of his life, and now I have to decide whether to put him through a risky treatment. Yes. He let out a short, humorless laugh.
That's a lot. I know. He turned to me again. And you've been making all these decisions alone? As much as I legally could, I said. As much as I legally could, I said. But this, I can't decide this without you. Daniel nodded slowly. Of course. Silence settled again. This time it felt different, less tense, more real. Does Emily know? He asked after a moment. No. Jessica, no. But this I can't decide this without you. Daniel nodded slowly. Of course. Silence settled again. This time it felt different, less tense, more real. Does Emily know? He asked after a moment. No. Jessica?
No.
Daniel let out a long breath. They're going to find out, he said. I know, and it's not going to be easy. I know that too. He glanced at me. You're going to tell them. I hesitated. I don't think I can anymore. I admitted, not without you. Daniel studied me for a moment. Then he nodded. Okay. That one word carried more weight than anything else, because it meant he was stepping in, taking his place, accepting the truth, even if he wasn't ready for everything that came with it. I'll tell them, he said. My chest tightened. Are you sure?
No, he admitted. But it's my responsibility now. Tears burned in my eyes. Because for the first time, he was claiming it. Not running from it, not rejecting it, but stepping into it. I'm sorry. No, he admitted, but it's my responsibility now. Tears burned in my eyes. Because for the first time, he was claiming it. Not running from it, not rejecting it, but stepping into it. I'm sorry, I whispered, for everything. Daniel didn't respond right away. He just stood there, looking at Lucas. Then quietly he said, You should have trusted me. The words weren't loud, but they hit deeper than anything else. I know. I said, and I meant it, more than anything. He stepped closer to the bed again, this time without hesitation. Gently, carefully, he adjusted the blanket around Lucas' shoulders. A small gesture, but it said everything. I'm here now. He stepped closer to the bed again, this time without hesitation. Gently, carefully, he adjusted the blanket around Lucas's shoulders. A small gesture, but it said everything. I'm here now, he murmured. Lucas didn't respond. But somehow, it still felt like something had shifted, like something important had finally begun. Daniel looked back at me. We'll figure this out, he said. I nodded. Yes, we will. But even as I said it, I knew something. This was only the beginning of another storm. Because once the rest of the family found out, nothing would stay quiet for long. Daniel made the call the next morning. Not to the doctor, not to the hospital, but to his wife.
I was sitting in the same chair beside Lucas when I heard his voice in the hallway, low controlled, but unmistakably tense. "Jessica, I need you to come to St. Mary's." There was a pause on the other end. I couldn't hear her words, but I could imagine the confusion, maybe even irritation. "It's important," Daniel added. "And bring Emily." My heart tightened. This was happening faster than I had prepared for. Too fast. When he stepped back into the room, I looked up at him. "You're telling them now?" I asked quietly. He nodded. "They deserve to know." I swallowed. "Yes, they do." But that didn't make it easier. Daniel leaned against the wall, arms crossed again, though his posture had changed. There was weight in it now, responsibility, not just anger. "They'll be here in about 30 minutes, he said. 30 minutes. That was all the time left before the truth spread beyond this room. I glanced at Lucas, still resting unaware of the storm building around him. "I wish we had more time," I murmured. Daniel looked at me. "We don't." He was right. We never really had. The silence between us was different now. Not empty, just heavy. "Did you ever think about telling me on your own?" he asked suddenly. "I did," I said, "many times." "Then why didn't you?" I took a deep breath. "Because every time I tried, I imagined your face." He frowned slightly. "What about it?" "The moment you realized everything," I said. "The anger, the confusion, the hurt." He looked away. "And you thought avoiding that would make it better?" he asked. "No," I admitted. "I just thought maybe I could protect you a little longer." Daniel let out a quiet breath. "You didn't protect me," he said. "You just delayed it." I nodded. "I know that now." Another silence. Then he asked something I hadn't expected. "Did Dad know?" My chest tightened. "No. Why not?" "Because he passed before I found out the full truth," I said. Daniel nodded slowly. "So this was all on you?" "Yes." "For 10 years. "Yes." He shook his head again, not in anger this time, but in disbelief. "I don't know how you carried that," he said. I looked at Lucas. "You just do," I said softly. When there's no other choice, Daniel followed my gaze. For a moment, we both stood there, looking at the same boy, connected in a way neither of us had chosen, but couldn't deny. Then the door opened, and everything changed again. Jessica walked in first. Her expression was already tense, like she had come prepared for an argument. Emily followed right behind her, her eyes scanning the room quickly until they landed on me. "Mom," she said, confused. "What's going on?" Jessica crossed her arms. "You said this was urgent," she said to Daniel. "What is this about?" Daniel didn't answer right away. He looked at me, just for a second, like he was giving me one last chance, one last moment to speak first. But I couldn't. Not anymore. This had to come from him. He turned back to them. "There's something you both need to know," he said. Emily frowned. "You're scaring me." Jessica's eyes narrowed slightly as she noticed the hospital equipment, the room, the bed. "Why are we in a patient room?" she asked. Daniel stepped aside slightly, and for the first time, they saw him. Lucas. The room fell silent instantly. Emily's expression shifted from confusion to concern. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Who is that?" Jessica looked between Daniel and me,
her suspicion rising immediately. "What is this?" she demanded. Daniel took a breath. "This is Lucas." Emily stepped closer instinctively, her face softening as she looked at the boy. "He's so small," she said quietly. Jessica didn't move. She just stared. "And why are we here?" she pressed. Daniel hesitated for a split second. Then he said it. "He's my son." The words echoed in the room, louder than anything else. Emily froze. Jessica blinked. What Emily whispered. Jessica's voice came out sharper. "That's not funny, Daniel. I'm not joking." Emily looked at me, her eyes wide. "Mom, what is he talking about?" I felt my throat tighten. "It's true," I said softly. Jessica let out a short, disbelieving laugh. No, it's not. That's impossible." "It's not," Daniel said firmly. "Then explain it," Jessica snapped. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, clearly bracing himself. "It happened years ago," he said, "before we met." Jessica's expression hardened. "And you're just telling me this now? I didn't know?" "Telling me this now, I didn't know," he said. That stopped her. "What do you mean you didn't know?" she asked. Daniel glanced at me briefly. "Because Mom kept it from me." Emily turned to me instantly. "You knew?" she asked, her voice breaking slightly. I nodded. "Yes," he said. That stopped her. "What do you mean you didn't know?" she asked. Daniel glanced at me briefly. "Because Mom kept it from me." Emily turned to me instantly. "You knew?" she asked, her voice breaking slightly. I nodded. "Yes." "For how long?" 10 years. Emily took a step back like she'd been hit. 10 years, she repeated. Jessica's voice rose. "You've been hiding a child from us for 10 years. I was protecting." "Don't say you were protecting anyone," Jessica cut in sharply. "You lied." The word hung heavy. Emily shook her head, tears already forming in her eyes. "All those times you missed things, you said you were busy." "I was here," I said. "With him." Emily looked at Lucas again, then back at me. "So you chose him over us?" "No," I said immediately. "But that's how it feels," she whispered, and that hurt, because it was the same thing Daniel had said, the same misunderstanding. "I never chose one over the other," I said. "I was trying to hold everything together." Jessica scoffed. "Well, you failed." Daniel stepped forward. "Enough," he said firmly. Jessica turned to him. "Don't enough me. This affects our family too." "I know that," he said. "Do you?" She shot back. "Because you just told me you have a 10-year-old son you didn't even know about. I'm processing that too," he said. Emily wiped her eyes, her voice quieter now. "Is he okay?" she asked, looking at Lucas. Daniel hesitated. "Not really." The room fell silent again. Because now, it wasn't just about secrets anymore. It was about reality. And that reality was much harder to face. The silence after Daniel's words felt heavier than anything that had come before. It wasn't the kind of silence that passed quickly. It stayed, pressed against the walls, sat in every breath. Emily was the first to move. She stepped closer to Lucas's bed, slower this time, more cautious, as if she were afraid that getting too close might make everything more real. 10 years, she whispered again, her voice trembling. All this time, she turned to me. "You were coming here instead of coming to us." It wasn't a question. It was a realization. "I wasn't choosing between you," I said softly.
But that's exactly what it felt like, she replied, her eyes filled with tears again. All those birthdays, holidays times? I thought you just didn't care. Her voice broke. You didn't care? Her voice broke. You here? I nodded. Yes. Emily shook her head, overwhelmed. I don't even know how to feel right now. Jessica crossed her arms tighter, her voice sharp. I do. All eyes turned to her. This is betrayal, she said bluntly. Jessica here. I nodded. Yes. Emily shook her head, overwhelmed. I don't even know how to feel right now. Jessica crossed her arms tighter, her voice sharp. I do. All eyes turned to her. This is betrayal, she said bluntly. Jessica, Daniel started. No, she cut him off. Don't. Her gaze shifted to me. You lied to all of us, for years. I didn't lie, I said quietly. I just didn't tell the truth. That's the same thing, she snapped. Daniel stepped forward again. Jessica, this isn't helping. What do you expect me to do? She shot back. Smile. Welcome this like it's normal. Her voice rose slightly. You have a child, Daniel, a 10-year-old child. And you're telling me you had no idea I didn't, he said firmly. And your mother did. Yes. Jessica let out a bitter laugh. Unbelievable. She turned away, pacing a few steps before stopping again. This changes everything, she said. Daniel didn't argue, because she was right. It did. Does Ethan know? She turned away, pacing a few steps before stopping again. This changes everything, she said. Daniel didn't argue, because she was right. It did. Does Ethan know? Jessica asked suddenly. No, Daniel said. Good, she replied quickly. Because I have no idea how we're supposed to explain this to him. The mention of Ethan brought another layer of reality crashing in. Another child, another life, another complication. Emily looked at Daniel again. What are you going to do? She asked. Daniel hesitated. I don't know yet. Jessica scoffed. You don't know? That's your answer? It's been less than an hour since I found out. He said, his voice tightening. Give me a second to breathe. And what about him? Jessica gestured toward Lucas. He doesn't have a second to wait, does he? That hit hard, because she wasn't wrong. Daniel looked at Lucas, his expression shifting again. Guilt, responsibility, fear. All I know, he said slowly, is that he needs help. And you're just going to jump into that? Jessica asked. He's my son. And Ethan is your son, too. She shot back. The room tensed instantly. I know that, Daniel said. Then think about what this means for him, she continued. For our family. I am thinking about it. Are you? She pressed. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're about to turn our entire lives upside down for a child you just met. Daniel's jaw tightened. He's not just some child. He's a stranger to us, Jessica said. No, Daniel replied firmly. He's not. Silence fell again, because the truth of that statement couldn't be ignored. Emily stepped in quietly. Jess, maybe we should just slow down, she said gently. Jessica shook her head. No, we don't get to slow down. This is happening whether we like it or not. She looked at me again. And how could you keep this from us? Her tone wasn't just angry now. It was hurt. I thought I was protecting all of you, I said. By lying? She asked. By carrying it myself. And look where that got us, she replied. I didn't respond, because there was no defense left. Daniel stepped closer to Lucas again, his voice quieter now. What does he need right now? He asked. I took a breath. He needs a decision, I said, about the treatment. Yes, Daniel nodded slowly. And if we don't do it, he'll continue like this, I said. Maybe stable, maybe not. And if we do, there's a chance he could improve, I said, but also a risk he could get worse. Daniel looked down at Lucas, his expression heavy. So, either way, there's no guarantee. No. Jessica exhaled sharply. This is insane. Emily placed a hand gently on her arm. I know, she said softly. Jessica pulled her arm away, not harshly, but firmly. I need to think, she said. So do I, Emily added. Daniel nodded. Take the time you need. Jessica looked at him. And what about you? Daniel didn't hesitate. I'm staying. That answer surprised all of them, even me. Jessica's expression tightened. You're staying here? Yes. For how long? As long as he needs me. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Jessica stared at him for a long moment. Then she said quietly, This isn't just about you anymore. I know. And it's not just about him either. Daniel nodded. I know that too. She looked like she wanted to say more, but she didn't. Instead, she turned toward the door. I'm going home, she said. Emily hesitated. He'll go with you. I know that too. She looked like she wanted to say more, but she didn't. Instead, she turned toward the door. I'm going home, she said. Emily hesitated. He'll go with you. She looked at me one last time, her eyes softer now. Not forgiving? Not yet, but less harsh. I need time, she said. I understand, I replied. They left the room quietly. The door closing behind them felt louder than it should have, and just like that, it was just me and Daniel again, standing on the other side of everything. He exhaled slowly, running a hand over his face. That went about as expected. I gave a small, tired smile. Yes, they're not going to accept this easily. No, I said, they won't. Daniel looked at Lucas again, but that doesn't change anything. I stepped closer. No, I agreed. It doesn't. He sat down beside the bed this time. Really sat. Not standing, not pacing, just present. I missed 10 years, he said quietly. Yes, I'm not missing anything else. Tears filled my eyes again. Because for the first time, he wasn't just reacting. He was choosing, and that choice would change all of us. The hospital felt different after Emily and Jessica left. Quieter, but not peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that comes after something breaks. Not loud, not dramatic, just changed. Daniel stayed seated beside Lucas, his hand still resting gently over the boys. He hadn't moved much in the last hour. Just sat there, thinking, processing, becoming someone new right in front of me. I keep replaying it, he said suddenly. I looked up. What? The past, he said. Sarah, the night she stopped answering my calls, the way everything just ended. His voice was low, distant. I thought she left me,
he continued. I thought she changed her mind, or found someone else, or just didn't care anymore. My chest tightened. I'm sorry, I whispered. I was angry at her for a long time, he said. Even after I met Jessica, even after I moved on, there was always this part of me that felt abandoned. He swallowed hard. And now I find out she was in a hospital bed, pregnant, alone. The guilt in his voice was unbearable. You didn't know, I said gently. That doesn't make it better, he replied. I didn't argue, because sometimes knowing the truth doesn't fix the pain. It just changes it. I should have been there, he said again. You couldn't have been, I said. She made sure of that, and you helped her, he added. There was no accusation in his voice this time, just fact. Yes, he nodded slowly. I don't know how to feel about that. I don't expect you to, I said. He looked at me then, really looked. For 10 years, you carried this, he said. Yes. Why didn't you tell me after she died? He asked again. I hesitated, because this was the part I hadn't fully explained. Because by then, it wasn't just about you anymore, I said. He frowned slightly. What do you mean? It was about him, I said, nodding toward Lucas. His condition, his needs, his future. Daniel looked back at Lucas. And you thought bringing me into that would make it worse? I thought it would complicate everything I said. For him and for you. Daniel let out a slow breath. So you decided to handle it alone? Yes. That's a lot to take on. I didn't see it that way, I said. I just saw what needed to be done. He was quiet for a moment. Then he asked something that caught me off guard. Did you ever regret it? The question hung in the air. I looked at Lucas, then back at Daniel. No, I said honestly. Not once I regretted the pain it caused, I said. The distance between us, the misunderstandings. I paused, but I never regretted him. Daniel nodded slowly. I think I understand that, he said, and I believed him, because I could see it now. The way he looked at Lucas, not as a burden, not as a problem, but as something real, something his. Then his expression shifted again, more serious. What happens if we don't do the treatment? He asked. I took a breath. He'll continue like this for a while, I said, but eventually his body will weaken. And if we do it, there's a chance he could improve, I said, maybe even regain some independence. And the risk, he might not survive it, I said quietly. Daniel's hand tightened slightly around Lucas's. That's not much of a choice, he muttered. No, I agreed. It isn't. He leaned back in the chair, running both hands over his face. This is happening too fast, he said. I know. I just found out I have a son, and now I have to decide whether to risk his life. I know. He let out a shaky breath. I don't even know him, he said. You will? I said, softly. He looked at Lucas again. I want to, he said. That one sentence carried hope. Fragile, but real. Then his phone buzzed. He pulled it out, glancing at the screen. Jessica. He hesitated before answering. Hey, I couldn't hear her voice, but I could tell from his expression it wasn't calm. I know, he said. I know this is a lot. Pause. No, I'm not ignoring what this means for us.
Another pause. I need you to trust me right now. His voice tightened slightly.
"I'm not choosing him over you,"
He said. That's not what this is. I looked away, because I had heard those words before. From myself. Pause.
"Yes, I understand you're upset."
Longer pause.
"He'll come home later," he said. "We'll talk."
Another pause. Then more quietly, I love you too. He hung up slowly. That didn't go well, I said gently.
"No," he admitted, "but she'll come around,"
I added. He didn't answer right away. I hope so, he said finally.
"But I can't wait for that."
No, I said. You can't. He stood up then, walking over to the window for a moment. The city outside moved like nothing had changed. Cars passing, lights flickering, people living their lives, completely unaware that inside this room, everything had shifted.
"I need to make a decision,"
he said.
"Yes."
He turned back to me.
"And I need your honest opinion."
I nodded.
"Of course. If this were your choice, what would you do?"
The question hit me hard. Because I had asked myself that same question 100 times. Maybe more. I would give him a chance, I said. Daniel studied me, even with the risk. The question hit me hard, because I had asked myself that same question 100 times, maybe more. I would give him a chance, I said. Daniel studied me, even with the risk.
Yes.
Why?
Because he's been fighting his whole life, I said, and he deserves every opportunity to keep fighting.
Daniel looked at Lucas again.
Long, carefully.
Then he nodded.
Okay.
My heart skipped.
Okay,
I repeated.
I'm not going to let fear make this decision for me, he said. Not anymore.
Tears filled my eyes again, because this time, it wasn't just about truth, or guilt, or the past. It was about what came next. And Daniel had just chosen it. The doctor scheduled the procedure for the next morning. There was no dramatic build-up, no countdown. Just a quiet conversation in a small consultation room where Dr. Carter laid out the options again, calm, precise, clinical. Daniel listened without interrupting. That alone told me how much he had changed in just a few hours. This is the best chance we have to improve his condition, Dr. Carter said. But I need to be very clear. This is not a guaranteed success. Daniel nodded.
I understand. There are risks,
the doctor continued.
Significant ones.
I understand that too.
And if complications arise...
Dr. Carter hesitated slightly, choosing his words carefully.
We may have to make quick decisions. Daniel's jaw tightened. What kind of decisions? Life support measures, the doctor said. Intervention thresholds. Whether to continue or stop.
The room felt colder instantly. I watched Daniel absorb that. Every word, every possibility. Will he suffer? Daniel asked quietly. Dr. Carter shook his head.
We will manage his pain. He won't be alone.
Daniel nodded again. That seemed to matter to him, more than anything else.
I'll sign,
he said. No hesitation this time. No doubt. Dr. Carter handed him the forms. I watched as Daniel picked up the pen. His hand paused for just a second above the paper, just long enough to understand what he was doing. Then he signed. And with that, everything became real. That night was the longest of my life. Longer than the night of the accident. Longer than the nights I had spent sitting alone beside Lucas when he first arrived. Because this time, I wasn't just waiting. I was hoping.
and hoping was more dangerous. Daniel didn't leave Lucas's side, not once. He sat there talking quietly to him, even though Lucas couldn't respond. "You like space?" he murmured at one point, glancing at the small telescope still sitting unopened in my car. "I used to love that stuff when I was a kid," he continued. "Your grandma got me my first one when I was about your age." I swallowed hard at that, because suddenly, the past and present were overlapping in ways I hadn't expected. "You've got good taste," he added softly. There was a faint smile on his face, sad, but real. For the first time, he was speaking to his son. Not about him, not around him, to him, and that mattered more than anything. Early the next morning, everything moved quickly. Nurses came in, monitors were checked. Lucas was prepared. Daniel stood close, watching every movement like he was afraid to blink. "Can I go with him?" he asked. Dr. Carter shook his head gently. "Not into the operating room, but we'll keep you updated every step of the way." Daniel nodded. "Okay." They began to wheel Lucas out. And that's when something unexpected happened. Lucas's fingers moved. Just slightly. Barely noticeable. But enough. Daniel froze. "Did you see that?" he asked, his voice sharp with hope. "I did," I said. Daniel stepped closer, his voice softening instantly. Hey, buddy," he whispered. "I'm right here." Lucas didn't open his eyes, but his fingers twitched again. And this time, Daniel grabbed his hand. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. For a moment, it felt like Lucas heard him. Then the bed was moving again. Out the door, down the hallway, and just like that, we were left behind. The waiting room felt suffocating. Time slowed to something unbearable. Minutes stretched into something that felt like hours. Daniel paced, sat, stood again. Ran his hands through his hair more times than I could count. I sat quietly watching him, remembering another time, another hallway, another waiting room. The night Sarah was inside that same hospital, fighting, alone. "I should have been there for her," Daniel said suddenly. The words came out of nowhere, but I knew where they came from. "You couldn't have been," I said gently. "But I should have known something was wrong," he insisted. "I should have seen it." "You were young," I said. "You trusted her. That's not an excuse." "No," I agreed. "It's not. But it's the truth." He sat down heavily, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "I hate that she went through that alone," he said. "So do I. And now he is too." Daniel added, his voice breaking slightly. I reached over, placing my hand gently on his arm. "He's not alone," I said. "Not anymore." Daniel nodded slowly, but his eyes stayed fixed on the floor. "I don't deserve this chance," he said quietly. "Yes, you do." "No," he shook his head. "I didn't earn it." "Sometimes life doesn't work that way," I said. "Sometimes you're just given a chance, and what matters is what you do with it." He looked up at me then. "And what if I mess it up, you won't? How do you know?" "Because you're here," I said, "and that's already more than enough." He didn't respond, but I saw something shift in his expression. Not confidence, not yet, but belief. Hours passed, each one heavier than the last. Every time the door opened, Daniel stood up instantly. Every time it wasn't Dr. Carter, the tension came right back, until finally the door opened again, and this time it was him. Dr. Carter stepped inside, removing his gloves slowly. Daniel was already on his feet. "What happened?"
he asked. The doctor looked at both of us, serious, measured, and then he said the words that stopped my heart.
There were complications.
Everything went silent. Daniel's face drained of color.
What does that mean?
He asked. Dr. Carter took a breath.
He's still in surgery. Still. Not finished. Not safe. Not certain. My chest tightened painfully. Is he going to make it?
Daniel asked.
There it was, the question we had both been avoiding. Dr. Carter didn't answer right away. And that was the worst part. I don't remember sitting down. I don't remember breathing. All I remember is the silence after Dr. Carter said those words. There were complications. Daniel stood frozen in front of him like his body hadn't caught up with what his mind was hearing. What does that mean? He asked again. So what does that mean? He asked again, slower this time, as if saying it differently might change the answer. Dr. Carter stepped closer. We ran into some unexpected issues during the procedure, he explained. Lucas' body reacted more strongly than we anticipated. Lower this time, as if saying it differently might change the answer. Dr. Carter stepped closer. We ran into some unexpected issues during the procedure, he explained. Lucas' body reacted more strongly than we anticipated. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. Is he alive? He asked. That was the only question that mattered now. Dr. Carter nodded.
Yes, he's alive. The tension in my chest released just slightly, but not completely, because I could see it in the doctor's face. This wasn't over. But, Daniel said quietly, there it was, the word we were both waiting for. But he's not stable yet, Dr. Carter continued. We're monitoring him very closely. Daniel swallowed hard. Is he going to wake up? We don't know yet. That uncertainty? It was worse than anything. How long? Daniel asked.
The next few hours are critical. Hours. Not days. Not weeks. Hours. Daniel nodded slowly like he was trying to hold himself together, piece by piece. Can I see him? He asked. Dr. Carter hesitated. For a few minutes he said, but he'll still be in recovery. That's fine. The room they brought us into felt colder, sterile, quiet in a way that didn't comfort. Lucas lay there surrounded by more machines than before, more wires, more monitors, more reminders of how fragile everything was. Daniel stepped forward slowly, like he was afraid to get too close again. But this time, he didn't stop. He walked all the way to the bed, reached out, and took Lucas's hand. I'm here, he said softly. His voice cracked slightly. But I'm here. I stood a few steps behind him watching, not saying anything, because this moment didn't belong to me anymore. Daniel leaned closer. You don't get to give up now, he whispered. You hear me? The machines continued their steady rhythm, beeping, breathing, waiting. I just found you, Daniel said. You don't get to leave yet. Tears slipped down his face. Quiet, uncontrolled, real. And for the first time since all of this started, I saw him not just as my son, but as a father, fully, completely. The next few hours felt endless. We moved back to the waiting area, sat, stood, paced, waited. Every passing minute felt like something we were losing or gaining, but never knowing which. Daniel barely spoke. He kept checking the clock, looking at the door, then back at the floor, over and over again. At one point, he said something so quietly, I almost didn't hear it. I don't know how to do this. I looked at him. None of us do, I said. That's not comforting, he replied. I almost smiled. Maybe not, I admitted, but it's honest. He nodded slightly, then leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I've been so focused on everything I thought mattered, he said. Work, stability, being responsible. His voice trailed off, and now I realize I didn't even know what responsibility really meant. I let that sit for a moment, because I understood exactly what he meant. It's not about being perfect, I said. Then what is it about? It's about showing up, I said. Even when it's hard. Even when you're scared. Even when you don't know what to do. Daniel looked at me. That's what you did, isn't it? I hesitated. Yes. It's about showing up, I said. Even when it's hard. Even when you're scared. Even when you don't know what to do. Daniel looked at me. That's what you did, isn't it? I hesitated. Yes. For 10 years. Yes. He nodded slowly. I judged you, he said. I know. I thought you didn't care. I know that too. His eyes softened slightly. I was wrong. The words were simple, but they carried more weight than anything else he had said. I felt something inside me shift. Not relief, not yet, but something close to it. I understand why you thought that, I said. No, he shook his head. I should have asked more questions. I should have trusted you. I didn't respond. Because sometimes understanding comes too late. But it still matters. The door opened. Both of us stood instantly. Dr. Carter walked in again. This time his expression was different. Not tense, not rushed, calm. Daniel stepped forward. What happened? He asked. Dr. Carter gave a small, careful smile. He's stable. The words hit like light breaking through a storm. Stable? Daniel repeated. Yes. My knees felt weak. He made it through the worst of it. Dr. Carter continued. His body responded better than we expected after the complications. Daniel let out a breath I don't think he realized he was holding. Is he going to wake up? He asked. There's a good chance, Dr. Carter said. But it may take time. Daniel nodded. That's okay, he said quickly. We'll wait. I closed my eyes briefly. Because for the first time, hope didn't feel dangerous anymore. It felt possible. Can we see him? Daniel asked. In a little while, Dr. Carter said. We just need to make sure everything stays stable. Daniel nodded again. Thank you. The doctor left. And just like that, everything changed again. Daniel turned to me, his eyes still red, still tired, but different now. Lighter. He made it, he said. Yes, I whispered. He did. Daniel let out a small, disbelieving laugh. I almost lost him before I even got to know him. But you didn't, I said. He nodded. No, I didn't. And for the first time since this all began, we weren't standing in fear. We were standing in something else. Something fragile, but real. A second chance. Lucas didn't wake up that day, or the next, or the one after that. But he stayed, and somehow that was enough. At first, Daniel never left. Not really. He went home once briefly to shower and change clothes, but he came right back. Jessica didn't argue anymore. Not out loud, at least. The silence between them had become something fragile, something still figuring itself out. Emily visited on the third day. She stood quietly at the door at first, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to come in. "Hey," she said softly. Daniel looked up surprised. "Hey." She stepped closer, her eyes moving carefully over Lucas, taking in the machines, the quiet, the stillness. "He looks peaceful," she said. "He is," Daniel replied. Emily nodded, then looked at me. "I've been thinking," she said. I braced myself. "I was angry," she admitted. "At you. For a long time." "I know, and I thought I understood everything," she continued. "Thought I knew who you were." Her voice softened. "But I didn't." Tears filled my eyes. "Emily, I'm not saying it's okay," she added quickly. "What you did keeping this from us, I know. But I understand it now," she said. "At least a little. That was more than I had expected. More than I deserved." "Thank you," I whispered. She nodded, then turned back to Lucas. "Hi," she said quietly, almost shyly. "I'm your aunt." Daniel smiled faintly at that. A small moment, but it mattered. Jessica came later that week. She didn't say much at first, just stood beside Daniel, looking at Lucas with a complicated expression I couldn't fully read. "How is he?" she asked. "Stable," Daniel said. Jessica nodded. Then she surprised all of us. She stepped forward and gently adjusted Lucas's blanket, the same way Daniel had, the same way I had done for years. "He's beautiful," she said softly. Daniel looked at her surprised. Jessica shrugged slightly. "I'm still angry," she admitted, "about everything." "I know," Daniel said. "But that doesn't mean I don't care," she added. That was her way of trying, and it was enough. For now. A week later, Lucas opened his eyes. It wasn't dramatic. No sudden movement, no gasps. Just a small shift, a blink. Daniel was the one who saw it first. "Mom?" he whispered sharply. "Did you—" "I saw it," I said. We both leaned closer. Lucas Daniel said gently. For a moment, nothing happened. Then his eyes moved, slowly, focusing. Daniel froze. "I'm here," he said again, his voice softer than I had ever heard it. Lucas's lips parted slightly. No words came out. But something else did. Recognition. Not full. Not clear. But enough. Tears streamed down Daniel's face. "Hey, buddy," he whispered. "You took your time." Lucas blinked again, and this time, his fingers tightened slightly around Daniel's hand. Just a little, but it was everything. Recovery was slow, but steady. Lucas began responding more. Small movements, simple reactions, then eventually words. Not full sentences at first, just fragments. But every single one felt like a miracle. Daniel was there for all of it, every step, every moment, every breath. And with each day, he became more than just a man who had discovered he had a son. He became a father. Months later, we sat together in Daniel's living room. All of us, me, Daniel, Jessica, Emily, Ethan, and Lucas. The room was filled with something that had been missing for a long time. Not perfection, not complete healing, but something real, something honest, something earned. Lucas sat beside Daniel, still quieter than other kids his age, but present, aware, alive in a way that felt like a second beginning.
Ethan sat next to him, showing him how to use the telescope I had bought months ago. "Look," Ethan said excitedly. "You can see the stars." Lucas smiled faintly. A real smile, and that alone made everything worth it. Daniel watched them, his expression soft. "He's strong," he said quietly to me. "Yes," I replied. "He is," Daniel nodded. "I think he gets that from you." I shook my head slightly. "No," I said. "He gets it from both of you." Daniel didn't argue, because he knew. Later that night, as the house grew quiet again, Daniel and I sat together in the kitchen. Just the two of us, like we hadn't done in years.
"I'm still working through everything,"
He said.
"I know, but I'm not angry anymore."
He added. That meant more than he probably realized. "I'm glad," I said softly.
"I wish things had been different," he continued. "So do I. But if they were, I wouldn't have him," he said.
I smiled.
"That's true."
He looked at me.
"Thank you,"
He said.
"For what?" "For not giving up on him," he said. "When no one else could." Tears filled my eyes again. "I made a promise," I said.
"And you kept it."
"Yes."
He nodded, then added something that I would carry with me forever.
"You weren't irresponsible," he said. "You were stronger than all of us."
I shook my head. "No," I said gently. "I was just a mother trying to do the right thing." Daniel smiled slightly.
"Yeah,"
He said. "Exactly." And for the first time in a long time, everything felt whole. Not perfect, not without scars, but healed in the ways that mattered. Because sometimes the truth doesn't break a family. It rebuilds it, stronger than before. Sometimes the deepest truths in life are not the ones we hide from the world, but the ones we carry silently to protect the people we love. This story reminds us that love is not always loud, visible, or understood. Sometimes love looks like sacrifice without recognition. It looks like being judged, misunderstood, even rejected, and still choosing to do the right thing anyway. Kimberly's journey teaches us that real responsibility is not about appearances. It's not about always showing up perfectly or meeting everyone's expectations. True responsibility is about showing up where it matters most, even when no one is watching, even when it costs you everything. It's about choosing compassion over comfort and courage over convenience. At the same time, Daniel's transformation reminds us of something equally powerful. It's never too late to become who you were meant to be. Life doesn't always give us the truth when we want it, but when it does, we have a choice to run from it or to rise into it. Growth often begins in the most painful realizations, and perhaps the most important lesson of all, we should be careful when we judge others. Because we rarely see the full story. The person we think is irresponsible may be carrying a burden we couldn't even imagine. The silence we criticize may be protecting something sacred. So before we judge, we should try to understand. If this story touched you in any way, I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever been misunderstood by the people you love, or had to carry something heavy in silence? Leave a comment and share your experience. It might help someone else feel less alone. And if you enjoy meaningful emotional stories like this, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next one.